What's up, bikers? Welcome to the B1KER Bar Podcast live stream. Here we are, episode 136, and still stoked every time I start one of these shows. I feel like every time I want to start out like, wow, I can't believe I've been doing it that long. Anyways, we got Jeff Lenosky on and a couple of his buddies. We're going to talk about something new they're doing called Trail Boss Academy. But before we do that, let's go ahead and get over the normal stuff that I'm always bugging you guys about. Number one, swing by my Instagram, give me a follow, or you could do it on Facebook. Either one, it's totally cool. You could do thumbs up right here if you're already enjoying this, or a subscribe if you're listening to a podcast. Do me a favor, swing by Apple Podcasts, write a review. It helps the algorithm or something like that. Anyways, I really appreciate all you people out there on Patreon. Got a couple of new people this month. I'm stoked, super stoked. So thank you very much. That really helps the channel keep going. It helps out with all kinds of stuff. Like just the other day, lost a bag full of GoPro batteries. Really blows because I just bought them. And it's the guys on Patreon out there that are helping keep this channel going. You can do it for as little as $1 a month. $5, you can really help out. There's another tier that I'll send you all kinds of like super swag merch pack, whatever you want to call it, and you'll actually be like paying my house payment or something like that. But it's totally up to you what you want to do. If you don't want to do any of that, just listen for free. It's fine with me, man. I'm stoked that anybody's here in the first place. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop messing around with all that chatter, and we'll go ahead and bring these guys on. How's it going, Jeff?
Good. How are you?
Not bad, man. I am definitely. I'm doing good, dude. Honestly, I had like last week was one of those crazy hectic weeks where you just don't feel like you're gonna get your head above water. And this week is like, oh, finally, here I am.
Nice. Well, it's good to be back on the show. It's good to be back.
Yeah, man. Yeah, so you have two friends with you. Go ahead and introduce them, and that way people that are listening can get acquainted to who's who.
Yep. Contrary to popular belief, I do have two friends. So this is my good buddy Lance Trappe. He's been a friend of mine for 25 years, probably. Yeah. Started mountain biking together, riding trials together, and he's been in a bunch of my videos for the past 5 years or whatever. And then Max and I have been buddies for a couple months now. Yeah. Been friends with Lance for about a week. It's been working out so far, so good. But Max is from San Diego, California, and I met him when I did an Instagram challenge about 2 or 3 months ago, the 60-second manual challenge, and he was the first person to reply to it. And we've been buddies ever since.
You nailed it. Oh, right on, man.
Yeah.
What was the challenge? Just you have to do it for 60 seconds?
It was a 60-second manual challenge. I just made it up. I was trolling Rich Drew. He made an Instagram video, and I threw it out there, like, see if you could do it for 60 seconds. And then I made a video and then threw out the challenge, and Max within like hours responded with this awesome manual. So it was pretty sweet.
There you go. So what's been new, man? You've been growing the channel. You're like YouTube famous at this point, probably more famous on YouTube than you were like beforehand, right?
It's kind of crazy that the average mountain biker sees YouTube so much more than all this stuff. Like Lance was in a lot of the mountain bike videos back in the day, as well as myself. You would never get stopped on a trail for that stuff. And then nowadays, everybody sees the YouTube videos, or they recognize your voice a lot. Like I was just in Moab with Max, and you ride up behind somebody and they recognize your voice, which is something really weird. That never happened 10 years ago. So that was pretty cool. So yeah, doing YouTube thing, doing lots of group rides, but the big thing is just trying to grow Trail Boss Academy, and that's why these two guys are here with me.
Yeah, totally. It's funny you said the thing about the voice, because a lot of people will ride by me and they're like, oh, look, there's another fat dude on the trail. And then they hear me laugh, and then they're like, oh, wait, I know that guy. So what's Trail Boss Academy? What's this about?
Yeah, so, Trail Boss, I started the channel 5 years ago or so. And it's always been about that real technical, techie riding and stuff like that. And having a big background in mountain bike trials, doing a lot of trials demos, you started wanting to interact with the public more. I've always done that with my group rides and stuff like that. But you can only spend so much time on a group ride with 20 people. So we want to try to get a little bit more intimate with people, more hands-on, try to engage with people and help them learn. Because, you know, especially for Lance and I, Max is a young buck, but we've been riding for 25 years professionally. Like, for us to get that thrill of learning a new trick is kind of difficult, you know, but when you can share that stoke with somebody, kind of gives you the same feeling almost. So Lance did a lot of mountain bike trials demos. I've done a lot of mountain bike trials demos. We're so used to getting out and engaging with the public. So Lance was a no-brainer. And then when I met Max a couple months ago and saw he likes to ride just like we do, he came out a week ago. We did a clinic at Thunder Mountain, and here we are. We're going to put our foot on the gas and try to grow this thing.
Right on. So Max, are you planning on kind of leading a West Coast kind of version of the Academy? Is that what the deal is?
Yeah, that's the plan. Yeah, sort of be based out in San Diego and kind of work on the West Coast.
Uh-huh. What you have quite the California accent. Where are you from?
Yeah.
Lay it on him.
Yeah.
Do your answer this question in your California accent.
I'm just originally from England, but I've been in the States about 11 years now, I think.
Right on.
And I spent some time in Whistler as well, up in BC. But,
What led you into Southern California?
Year-round sunshine and the beach, and just I actually lived there when I was a little kid, until about 8 years old, and then moved back to England and kind of always wanted to get back, and had the opportunity to do it, and I've been there for about 1.5 years now.
Right on, man. What do you think? What do you think? Like, you being part of the Trail Boss Academy, what do you bring to the table for it? You know what I mean? Like, what do you think of, like, your passion of riding? Like, what is it that you feel like you can really express to people?
So before this, I was going to some events and working with Canyon bikes, and so I'd go to the events and get people stoked on the bikes. I really like being around people and kind of sharing the enthusiasm and seeing kind of people get really stoked on biking. And so the coaching side of things is really cool because you get to, you know, teach them skills and you see them like learn to love it even more, and you see the drive and the passion that they have, and it's really fun to be part of that.
Right. So what got you into riding?
So when I was a kid, I used to ride my bike to school, and me and a handful of friends, it was about a 45-minute ride, and we would just ride and practice wheelies and stuff on the way to school. And from there, I guess I got into BMX and then trials, and then moved to Whistler and for skiing actually, and then ended up staying for a summer and got a downhill bike and just been kind of really stoked on mountain bikes ever since.
Right on, man. So basically, riding back and forth from school was going to lead you to your 60-second manual, and here you are.
Yeah, right.
That's
How about you, Lance?
That's the one common thread between all of us. We all have that trials background. So we love mountain biking, but we're always the dudes on the side of the trail trying to ride over a rock or a log or a picnic table or whatever. So it's not how far or fast. We just like riding over different stuff.
Yeah, I got the perfect trail for you out here then. Have you ever ridden, I know you've been up to South Lake. Have you ever ridden Hole in the Ground?
No.
So it's not like the most fun mountain bike trail, let's just say it that way. Like, the first time you ride it, you're like, man, that was awesome. But the second time you ride it, you're like, I don't remember climbing that much. But one of the things that's really cool about that ride is the whole way through most of the trail, there's all these like just granite rocks and stuff all over the place that at any point you can just turn right, walk like 100 yards into a granite field and like just start playing around, like, oh, rock roll this, or come over this spine and go do this. And I think that you guys would really enjoy that. So
yeah,
think about it next time you're up there.
Sounds kind of perfect.
Let's do it.
Right. The first time I ever rode with somebody that was a trials rider, and I can't remember the guy's name, unfortunately, but he was one of the good guys, you know, a professional rider. And I just remember seeing him like stopping and playing on things where I was like, this is just blowing my mind. I would not even think to look over there as that is like, I'm like, oh, that's a rock. And they're like, oh, that's a feature, you know? So it was definitely interesting to watch. And then, you know, not too long after that, I think it was one of the first times I met Jeff, and seeing him just like go up this staircase in Sedona, and the way that a trials rider kind of attacks a feature is so different than the way that almost everybody else mountain bikes. And I think what you guys are doing then is by like taking that experience, it really gives people a different way to, like, a different perspective on how to ride. So it probably sets you up pretty well for training.
It absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. We get a lot of people of different skill levels, and, you know, from the basics to just really curious about the kind of stuff that we do. And they're always like, they want to learn the process, and we've been practicing for years and years. So it helps that we have that experience to take people through from a more technical side, as opposed to like a high speed momentum side, which is what most people just want to like roll through stuff. But we can add a little more nuance and technical ability to the learning process, pretty much.
Yeah, totally. So what got you into riding, Lance? You were just like, I made friends with Jeff, so I guess I got to do this.
No, it's the same. I was jumping curbs and riding to elementary school, and, you know, crashing on my way to third grade and whatever, and, you know, just having fun on a BMX bike. And then did a little bit of racing, and then saw somebody hopping up some stairs at an event, and I was like, man, I got to try that. And I couldn't do it at all. Like, couldn't balance for 1 second. And that just became a preoccupation, just trying to figure out how to, you know, kind of track stand, hop around a little bit. And then we, you know, that's kind of like, it relates to the learning process, because you think back to those early years and like what we were first thinking, like what we thought was cool. And that's what we're seeing in the classes too. Like, people are like, wow, how did you ride up that or pedal up that? And so that's where it started, and we're still in the same frame of mind. We screw around all the time. We just find rocks and things to jump up, and, you know, it's a never-ending learning process, really.
Yeah, totally.
One thing that's interesting, like when Lance and I first started, I probably rode for 3 or 4 years before I met Lance, but I like literally met him when he was 17, like really long time ago. And we learned early on, like I used to ride by myself, and it was so hard to learn stuff. And then once you start riding with somebody, like you create these mental barriers. And whether it was him, you know, we'd be both struggling to do the same move. And then if he did it, I would always do it like right away next, or vice versa. Like, you just have to see somebody do it. So I feel like that translates to coaching, like being able to not only demonstrate for the riders in person, because people go watch YouTube videos all day long. And obviously I have a YouTube channel, I make lots of how-tos and stuff like that. But there's nothing that could compare to like going out with a coach that is capable of demonstrating if they need to. But then the other thing is being able to give the riders feedback, because it's one thing watching a YouTube video and you think that you're doing something, but we'll pull out the iPad, we'll sketch on it, or you could watch, but just having that feedback makes such a huge difference. So when you go out with people and they can see you and you help them, like their skills progress so fast. So I feel like it is kind of like 30 years ago when Lance and I used to go out and ride with one another and have those breakthrough moments. Now we just have it with other riders.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely helps being with somebody else, and even just in your friend group when they go out and to session something, to see them do it in person is way different than watching a video. I 100% agree with you. I think that you guys were talking about how you started, and I know, Jeff, you're pretty close to my age. I'm 45, and in that the time that I was young and learning how to ride bikes, BMX was really big. Like everybody, like movies like Rad came out, and everybody's like, man, I need to like do these tricks. And that kind of riding was definitely like had the attention of like young kids that wanted to ride bikes. So it's interesting to see that kind of all come full circle to today, where tricks and things of that nature that you really just thought you were doing for fun, like to like show off or like make girls be like, oh, that's cool, you know, like now is actually things that are legitimately like worth something while you're riding mountain bike. You know, it's not just like doing a manual looks cool, but there's a lot of great purpose to that, you know?
Yeah. And you learn all that stuff when you're a kid and you have the time to mess around. But then with mountain biking, it's usually more of a, you know, kind of a grown-up sport. So a lot of people go for rides with their friends. They don't want to stop in session. They'll try a log hop once a week. Could take them 20 weeks to do it. If you just went out and sessioned, you could probably session it 20 times and just learn it. Yeah. And then the other thing is there's a lot of adults now. I see it all the time. It's so weird. Like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, if there was a kid mountain biking, it was because their dad dragged them into it. And nowadays we meet tons of like dads our age that they got into it because their kid got into it, because it's so accessible on YouTube now. Like mountain biking is a youth sport as well now. It used to be like a grown man and woman sport. Now kids are getting into it. So we have these dads come to our clinics that, you know, have been riding 2 years and they're just trying to keep up with their kids.
Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting. I mean, I've had some parents that came up and introduced me to their child because their child was a fan of the podcast or my channel, and neither of the parents rode. They were like, oh yeah, we brought him here because he like wanted to be at this event. And it's like, that's kind of crazy to think about, because exactly like you said, I mean, when I grew up, I got into mountain biking because it was an adult that was taking me. You know, and it's definitely, I mean, you see it now. There's, you know, high school teams and middle school teams, and it's really rad. There was none of that, you know, back in the day. What do you guys think the like, how do you start your class out? Like what do you do there? You're just like, all right, everybody, this is a pedal.
I think the biggest thing is setting the criteria for what the class is going to be. You know, we do a lot of private coaching, so that's a little bit different. Like Max went out this weekend and coached a 9-year-old one day who was a total shredder.
Absolutely ripping Mountain Creek, just hitting every jump on the mountain. It was so sick.
Yeah. And then the other day was a mid 40-year-old guy went the private lessons. It's easy because, you know, you could work on certain objectives, but with the classes, you just have to be real careful of like setting the curriculum so that everybody knows what they're in store for, you know, whether it's an intermediate day or intermediate advanced day. And with the intermediate stuff, we start with like the fundamentals, just getting your body position down, braking drills, cornering drills, because everything kind of flows from there. So if you're not in the right position to begin with, then everything's going to be more difficult. So we just work on those fundamentals. And sometimes we do get some riders that feel like it's, you know, not worth practicing or whatever. It might be a little basic, but then we try to convey to them, you know, Seth Curry doesn't go out and play basketball. He sits there and shoots 1,000 free throws, and NFL quarterbacks do drills, you know, but with mountain biking, we don't do drills. We just go out and ride. And it's really hard to improve if you're just riding. You know, you have to go out and practice stuff.
What is it? 10,000 hours?
10,000 hours. Yeah. But 10,000 hours of good practice. We had an interesting guy in our clinic the other day. He was a big motocross guy. And he said he took a class once and he heard a student say, I've been motorcycling for 25 years. And the coach was like, no, you have 25 years or 1 year of experience 25 times. Because it's bad practice. If you just do the same thing over and over and you don't do it with
dead horse.
Then it's not 25 years, it's 1 year 25 times.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. That's totally me. I have been consistently trying to manual for, let's just say, a long time. And really how I do that is I'm coming to a creek, I pull my handlebars up, I'm like, oh, and it went down. And then I'm like, okay, I'll try that again next time. So one of these days I need to go out and actually practice. So you have events, and then you have the private lessons. So let's talk about the events. Like how does that go? Because I think what I saw online, like it was a couple day thing that you had going on, or?
Yeah. So basically we'll go to, you know, like Lance was saying earlier, what we really love doing is technical trail riding stuff. And we will get to that in 2023 quite a bit. But the bike parks are so easy because it has everything that you need right there. You know, if you're teaching somebody to do drops or jumps, like everything's right there. Whereas, you know, sometimes on the trail, it's harder to find controlled environments to do stuff. But at the events, it's usually a 2-day thing. You have the opportunity to do like an intermediate one day, intermediate advanced the next day, you know, so you could choose just one, or the best experience is to do both. We just did that clinic at Thunder Mountain. When you spend a couple days with somebody, it's like you end up being friends with them by the time they leave, and you really get to like learn more about their riding ability and stuff like that. That's like the best experience. Like I feel like after Thunder Mountain, we're all like, hey, call us next time you see us. Actually,
definitely
Lance and Max just rode with some of the people that were with us last week at Thunder, and I've ridden when I was at Thunder, I saw some guys I'd coached a few weeks prior to that, and you just feel like all these people are your buddies after that when you get to spend that much time with them.
So are you planning to travel the events around a little bit, or are they going to be primarily East Coast and a little bit West Coast, or what's the long-term goal there?
Lance likes to winter in Florida, so that'll be a no-brainer. Max is from San Diego, so we'll have the West Coast cover. I have the Northeast, so going into the winter, we'll probably lean more on these guys and go to Florida, California, Southeast or Southwest. And then when the spring rolls around, get back to the Northeast. So yeah, our intention is to do at least one big event a month, 2023, but spread out all over the country.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's really rad. So like the assumption would be like if you're going to Sedona, that maybe you would put something on at the same time. Or?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We're still a small operation, so the more you could combine events together.
Yeah.
Last year I was at Sea Otter for 2 weeks, so I did one there. I did some private stuff in Sedona. So obviously, yeah, if you're going someplace, try to double dip as much as possible.
Hey, Lance, whenever you first start a private lesson, how do you like size somebody up? Because everybody is like your bike skills and how you express them it's really subjective. So it's like, you could be like, yeah, no, I'm upper intermediate. And then you're like, well, maybe you're not. And then somebody else could be like, yeah, I'm like middle of the road, and they're really like closer to expert because the guys they ride with make them feel that way. So how do you go about that?
Yeah, it's true. People don't always have a good frame of reference or an accurate frame of reference. So if you can just ride with people a little bit and try some obstacles and things, just ride down maybe a basic trail and see what their body position is and how they're handling the terrain and stuff. I feel like that's the easiest thing, to watch somebody ride and kind of gauge where they are as far as their skill level. Not necessarily what they think it is, but most people are better than they think, and it's not always the case.
Yeah.
With the private lessons, it's not a problem. It's the group lessons that sometimes it can be a challenge. That's why I try to keep the group super small. Like at Thunder, everybody signs up for the same category, but there is a pretty big difference in ability levels. But if you have 3 coaches, you just split up into smaller groups, and then you could have, it's an intermediate day, you can section people out, and we can work a little bit more intimately on a one-on-one. It doesn't.
And mix up the coaching too. That way the groups get to go to everyone, which is cool. So kind of get to work with different people, and they get to work with different coaches.
We want everybody to hear that accent, so we can't. We need to cycle California.
Right. That Southern California accent. So Max, whenever you're approaching, trying to like help somebody out when you're first meeting them, you kind of have to like find a way to connect with them and understand like, how they learn. How do you go about doing that?
So I guess when, like Lance was saying, like going down and following the first time, following behind them, you kind of get an idea of where they're going, and also just talking to them. I like to ask them like what type of riding they like to do. What's your favorite kind of trail? And if they're somewhat local and they can tell you local trails that you're familiar with, I think you can get kind of an idea about whether this person really likes tech trails, but maybe they don't like jumping and they don't feel comfortable coming off the ground, or vice versa. Some people just want to jump all day, but give them a really steep tech line and they're not really feeling comfortable on it. So I think just talking to them about it and getting a feel for what they enjoy and where they like to ride is a good way. But definitely following them, kind of, you can learn a lot, I think, from just seeing someone riding in front of you and see how they approach different obstacles and how comfortable they look on that obstacle too.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned the different things of fun, because like I have a buddy that really likes to jump a lot, and he's always trying to talk me into it. And I'm like, I don't really care, dude. But like, I want to go down some like stupid, chunky, gnarly stuff. And he's like, why are you doing that? So
yeah, it's funny how different the people like that. And you meet some people who are really fast riders who just handle the tech stuff so well, but give them a small gap jump and it freaks them out with the gap in the middle. Tabletops definitely are more rider friendly, but a gap jump, a lot of people, even though they can handle that skill wise, it just freaks them out mentally. So
yeah, that's me 100%. Like, it doesn't even make any sense, like, at all. But yeah, that's the way it goes, right? And so how do you work on overcoming those fears? Like, say somebody is a person that's afraid of the gap, but they're like, how do I accomplish this? What would you do?
So for me, I think from a jump standpoint, definitely start on tables and kind of build their confidence up. And I think it's important to, when they are comfortable and you feel comfortable for them doing something, to let them know, that you've got this, you can definitely do it, build their confidence up. Because a lot of it is they have the skill, but they just don't have the confidence, or they don't trust themselves enough. I like to demonstrate, hit the obstacle first so they can see it, and then go look at it, talk about different elements of the jump. Good example, I rode yesterday Mountain Creek, and there's this pretty big gap jump with a sort of built up landing, and you come in full speed, no brakes, around a decent berm, and there's a little drop. And so I was coaching this 9-year-old Logan who just absolutely rips, but he hadn't hit this feature yet, and he wasn't really sure about it. So he checks out at the start of the day, and by the end of it, he wanted to check it off and tick off the list. So we went back and looked at it, and I kind of rolled in a few times with him. He pulled off the side of the jump, and I hit it so he could check it out. We looked at the lip and kind of showed him, because we had been hitting some pretty steep lips, and this one wasn't as steep. So we're talking about how, this isn't going to send you as high, but it is going to send you pretty far, and just talk about the different technical aspects. And so took him back up, and he came down and hit it, and then felt pretty good, hit it again and cleaned it perfect. So I think it's sort of making sure that they know they can do it and they're capable, and then just going through all the details to give them that confidence they need to actually hit it as well. And also feel it out. If someone's not confident, to the point that you don't think they should be doing it, then you're not going to try to push someone into something they shouldn't be riding. It's about kind of knowing the rider's ability as well.
Right.
No, it's like you said too, like, we can watch somebody ride, but then if we can do it and they watch us, that's a good learning tool as well. People learn different ways.
Definitely. And filming people and showing them in slow motion and pointing something out, we've been using iPads and things, and that works really well too, because you can feel like you're doing something, and then you look at a video and you realize, oh, we're not doing that at all, or I didn't realize that I looked like that in the air. So I think that's a good tool as well.
It seems like
definitely. Go ahead.
I was going to say, it seems like for the intermediate riders, it's just dialing in those fundamentals, like making sure that it's second nature and they don't really have to necessarily think about it. And then with the advanced riders, like who Max was working with yesterday, Logan, it's more like the kid knows how to jump. It's more tactical stuff. So Max being able to go down, letting them know what it feels like, giving them the intel, speed, things like that. We don't have to explain how to pop and jump. The kid knows. Just giving them that extra info and letting them see it. That higher level coaching, which is something we really like to do too. It's a lot of just tactical stuff. They got the technical stuff down. So it's just letting them know the conditions, basically.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely helps. I had a friend tow me into some stuff that I had never hit before, and having them like being able to walk me through it that way, it was like, oh my God, I just hit a 25-foot table. I wouldn't have never thought I could do that.
Yeah.
So definitely cool. But if you put a gap in the middle of it, I'm freaking out.
Pretty common.
I'm the opposite. Yeah. I see a tabletop and I'm like, I don't need to jump. But when I see a gap, I'm like, I better hit this jump. I don't want to go in the middle.
Yeah,
it's like motivation.
So when new riders show up to either training or one of these bigger events that you have, what's the thing that most of them want to take away from it? Is it like, I want a bunny hop?
Yeah.
Drops and jumps.
Yeah, I think
everybody wants to do drops and jumps. So
how would you characterize the difference between those two?
Between a drop and a jump?
Yeah.
I guess lack of a lip. A jump has a lip, it's going to send you airborne, and a drop is typically just flatten it. And I always like to tell people they only get easier. Like you start at the highest point. So if you're at the top of a 2-foot drop, it's only going to get less. You'd probably go that high off of a jump, but it's just less intimidating when you start on the ground. But drops and jumps by far are the two things that most people want to learn, and I guess manuals as well.
Yeah.
But I feel
do you think you should learn a drop first or a jump first? What came first, the drop or the jump?
I think a jump probably came first, but what we're trying to do with Trail Boss Academy, we try to teach drops first because there's a lot of elements and timing that will translate to the jump. So it's a little bit different than other people teach jumps. But the main thing that we're trying to do is simplify these things as much as possible. So, we all collaborate on the curriculum, but before they came on board, I was the one trying to come up with this, and I have a tendency to over-explain stuff. So I've learned a lot over the past.
Not at all. No way. Don't say that. That's not true.
Lance, I can't believe you said that. You took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah, I over-explain stuff. If you ask me,
I call it a TED Talk of bicycle technique.
Yeah.
Very, very intricate. Yeah.
I would have told you how to do a drop, how to tie, but you have to tie your shoes a certain way and have 62 pounds of pressure in your tire, and, every single element. So with their help, I've been trying to whittle things down to as few cues as possible, because then that's what we're there for, is to give some cues, get you going in the right direction, and then we can watch you and help you work from there. Because some riders are going to do things naturally that are good. Some things they'll do things that might not be serving them great off the bat. So then if you have a coach there that could help you work through that process, it seems that more often than not, you're better off with as few cues as possible, as simple as possible, and then get them in the right direction, and then work with them to tailor each rider, especially in the group settings. If you have 10 different riders, they're all going to hear things differently. And some people, you might say lean back to one rider, and the other rider might think push the bike forward, and it might accomplish the same thing, but they just hear it differently. So that's kind of one of the cool things about coaching, is like not just learning how to do the trick, but how to explain it to other people. Yeah.
So let's go through some of what you would talk about with the drop, because it's curious to me. I'm thinking about what you're saying, and I think that when you hit a drop, depending on kind of what you're doing, you kind of like preload the bike a little bit, right?
So on some drops, absolutely. When we do like our intro to drop, the first thing that we try to do is get you to go off of a drop with as little body movement as possible, and then teach you techniques to make up for lack of momentum. If you're going into a drop really fast, it's easy, right? Because your bike's on and off the drop as fast as possible. So there's things we can do with our body to like create momentum or create speed for our bike to accomplish the same thing if we don't have it. So we teach really, really slow speed drops first, which is what a lot of coaches don't do. They'll teach you how to do a 5-6 foot drop medium speed, and then people get into a real world trail situation where it's 2 feet really slow with nuance, and then they're all tripped up. And then it gives them this false sense of security because they have a 6 foot one. So they're like, well, I can do 6 feet. Why can't I do 2 feet? I'm just going to send it. And then they end up on Pink Bike Fail Fridays.
You got to talk them back. You got to talk them back. Yeah.
So we start with like really slow speed drops first, create that bookend, and then we walk them through a process to do it to go quite a bit faster. And then once you have those 2 endpoints, then it's a lot easier for the riders to kind of extrapolate in the middle how to go really slow, how to go really fast, and then it helps them wire into their brains how to do it anywhere in between. Because mountain biking is just a series of it's like putting cards in a Rolodex. The more drops you do, it's crazy how our brains do those micro calculations so quickly. But you have to see a drop slow, you have to see one fast, you have to, you have to see all those situations. And then your mind is just reaching in the Rolodex, pulling out the cards, and they're like, I've seen this before. Here I go. I know exactly what to do.
Yeah. So what's the key to the slow speed?
Diversity of drops.
Yes.
So what's the key to the slow speed drop?
Key to a slow speed drop would be going in with a bunch of bend in your elbows and knees and having the ability to slide the bike out from underneath you, like to push it off the drop if you don't have speed. So if you're going really slow, you got to have a lot of bend in your elbows and knees so you can scoot the bike out forward, get it off the drop as fast as possible. And then as you add speed, then you don't need to do that. You can be more centered on the bike because your bike's on and off the drop to begin with, so quickly to begin with.
Right.
We don't want to do like a big preload. We don't want to do a hop. That's one we see all the time.
Super common. Yeah, everyone wants to hop up and off the drop rather than just making the most of the drop itself. And
I think that's an English style.
I don't know. This is news to me. I've not. Apparently, that's what it's called. I've never heard of it.
He's from California.
Yeah, exactly. What I know.
But that's an intuitive thing to do because when you go off of a drop, the second your front wheel goes off, it starts dropping, right? So gravity's pushing on your back tire effectively. It makes rotation. So it makes a lot of sense for a rider to go off and hop because they're making their bike light. So if they make their bike light, then it's not going to rotate. Problem is it works on certain drops fine, but it's not really a one size fits all solution. If you're going really fast, it doesn't work. If you're landing in a rock garden, it's not your best bet. If the landing is really close and it requires a certain amount of speed to do that hop, the math doesn't add up, so we try to teach a really scalable drop technique first. 2 years down the road, if you're like in Sedona doing the most technical drop ever, sure, you might have to hop for certain things. But by the time you get to that point, you're probably going to have the intuition to figure that out. We try to teach intermediates how to just do a really good, consistent drop technique so that's not the variable. Like the drop technique's the same no matter what. The only variable is the terrain.
Yeah. So it's better to get them. So what you're trying to do initially with teaching the drop is getting them comfortable to be in the air and then having a proper like body position on the bike while they're doing that.
Yeah. The big thing is for teaching a drop before a jump is when we teach the riders to do the drop technique the way we teach it, then they're performing a motion when they leave the edge of the drop, right? So it teaches you to kind of be patient. It teaches you that if you're in the right position, you don't need to go up to a drop and get in the back seat. That's super common for people to come to a drop and get back. The second you get back, your arms go straight and then you can't do anything. So it's really important to be centered or even a little bit forward with some bend in your elbows when you get to that edge, because then all options are on the table and you could manage that, right? Depending on your speed and everything. If you're back here, you can't do anything. So if we get them comfortable doing that, and then we go to a jump, which is basically almost like a curved drop, then we can get them in the movement pattern to like perform something when they're leaving the lip. Because then again, just like drops, everybody hops too early. They lunge forward off jumps. They're not patient and they don't press their back wheel into the lip the entire way up. And then you just keep going faster and faster off all these jumps because you're effectively making the jump way smaller than it needs to be, because if you take videos of them, they're not even contacting the jump the last quarter of it, right? So we want them to go slower and be patient and really go all the way up to the top of the lip. So using the top of that lip is kind of like doing a drop. So it just seems to be like a good way of teaching people to do that.
Interesting to think about it.
Picture a long jump ski jump, right?
There you go. Yeah.
It's the exact thing, right?
Yeah.
They fire down and then just launch off the end. Yeah. That's what we're trying to say.
I think for drops and jumps, riders need to learn to be patient. That's the number one mistake we see, right?
I think on both, particularly like on the jumps, you see people hopping way too early, and on really mellow lips, you can get away with it. But throw in a much steeper lip, and it's not really something you can do, and you're going to start getting bucked and all other kinds of things. So I think it's just a good thing to initially get away from, and it serves you in a variety of situations.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about. It's definitely I don't have any skill set at all at explaining how to ride a bike. Like I'm just like, I've done it for so long. I don't know what the hell you're talking like, but when I hear somebody else explain it, I'm like, yeah, that is what I'm doing. Okay.
So I feel like for riders like yourself, we've been using some iPads coaching. That helps so much Because if we went out and I was like, Robert, you're doing X, Y, and Z, try ABC, you would be like, I am doing ABC. And if I could show you on video, then you're like, well, crap. Yeah, you're right. And then we can show you how to correct it and draw on there and everything. It really helps riders understand. Lance and I, Max is a new guy in the group. So we've only been riding with Max a little bit, but actually we did it in Sedona, like where I'll video him and then show him like, and you're like, oh, I see it. Lance and I do that all the time. Like we watch each other ride so much that if he says like, oh, you need to lean back a little bit more or get over the front end more. Like we have the same vernacular. We know exactly what we're talking about, and we coach each other all the time. Like doing the kind of stupid stuff that we do out on the trail all the time. It's just like you think that you're doing something, but you're not. You need that extra set of eyes for sure.
Yeah, I could totally see that. I mean, I know for me, it would definitely like seeing myself on video would definitely like it would help a lot. You know what I mean?
Get you out there. We're gonna get him out there.
Yep. Sedona 2023.
So once you get into the jumping, what's the thing you said? So mostly you just see people like trying to hop too early. How would you that's the biggest mistake that you see people making? People
staying really low as well and not wanting to extend their body off the lip. They just stay in a very kind of squatted crouch position, and they'll go look to as if they want to come off the lip, and then just before it they'll drop back down and it just kind of squashes everything. I think that's definitely something I noticed from the clinic the other day. But the timing is huge for sure. People like not compressing or not sort of preloading the bike, if you will. They either do either the speed's off, like the intensity of the preload, or just the timing of when they do it, I would say is big.
It's mental too. Like jumping, you have to really want to get into the air. And a lot of times as people are coming into it, they're scared.
Yeah, lack of commitment,
too.
For sure.
You know, like even when we were riding at Mountain Creek, like that big step up or whatever, it's like, do I really want to fly into the air? And that alters what your body really does. But that's why you kind of get into a controllable scenario and like help people feel what's going on and see what they're doing and try to give them feedback so they can process that. Yeah, because a lot of times they're just getting scared or acting too quickly or something like that.
Yeah, I feel like I can like judge a jump or a drop very well in a natural environment, but if you put me in a bike park, like just the way that the lips look, they scare the shit out of me. So like what do you do to like help people understand that? And like, because just looking at one, like if you're at a bike park, say somebody's coming to your class, maybe they've never even ridden a bike park, you look at those the way that they're shaped and you're like, that's going to shoot me to the moon.
Yep. You want to practice on the mellowest lips first, because when you work on a mellow lip, then you really have to press into that lip with your feet and drive into that lip to get height. You know, that other than the timing, the other thing that most people make the mistake jumping is you don't jump your bike by lifting your bike. You jump your bike by pressing into the ground, right? You're riding into a ramp surface. If you press into that, it's going to send into the sky. If you lift up, you're just removing that force. So it's actually counterproductive. If you go up a jump and you lift your bike, you're taking away from the force that thing's trying to give you, right? So you got to slow it down, first of all. Like, stop going so fast, slow it down, press into that lip, and start to learn to get height off of a mellow lip. And then as you start going into steeper lips, if you want to go really high, then you press into that lip. And if you want to try to minimize it, then you do absorb some of that energy. But there's different things that you can do with your body, but you got to learn how to do it on a mellow lip first. Because when riders go and learn on a really steep lip first, they go into it way too fast and they just absorb it. And then it's hard to get them to learn to press into it. If you just get in that habit of absorbing the energy and just going faster and faster, and you just see people only using speed as an indicator of whether or not they make a jump versus the X and Y axis. They're not using height at all. They're just using speed.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting.
Max rode at Whistler for a long time, so he's probably ridden more jumps than all of us combined. So
Yeah, I mean, the other thing I think that I've noticed is everyone's getting on longer and longer travel bikes too. And the more suspension you have, the more effort it requires, I think, to really get the most from the bike. And we had some people on downhill bikes from the clinics, and you could tell that they weren't giving enough into the lip. And that was kind of, I think, just letting people aware, and that's why I think having a dirt jump, a hardtail, something like that's such a great learning tool, because you can learn on that, and then you take those skills and you kind of put them onto the big bike. Same with the trials, honestly, too. Like, it's cool to see you learn all this trial stuff, and now you can do so much of it on the mountain bikes because they're so capable, and it's just working out how to do that. And so with everyone, riding, a lot of people riding enduro bikes, at least, 170 mil travel bikes pretty common. And so just letting them know how much effort they need to put into it. You're not just going to roll out a jump and just float over it. It does require a lot of body movement from the rider itself.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think like when Jeff was talking about, pushing into it, it just reminded me of like doing a bump jump. And that was one of those things that I heard somebody explain. I think it was Jeff Kendall Weed on his channel. And it was like in my head, I was like, I never even really thought about what I was doing. But I think though that moment, or that the way that you do a bump jump is exactly what you're talking about. It's just that pressing into something to decide how much like lift you're going to get, basically.
Yeah,
100%.
One of the analogies we give during the clinics is, because we'll get people on hardtails, we'll get people on trail bikes, we'll get them on downhill bikes. When you're doing those movements on your hardtail, like imagine if you're standing on just pavement and I told you to hop in the air, you hop a certain way. And then if you were standing on a mattress and I said hop, it's obviously you hop completely different, right? You got to slow things down and be more deliberate. And then that downhill bike would, you go into a lip of a jump and you press into it. Now all of a sudden it's like a trampoline. You got to really slow things down and be really deliberate, So if people try to press on a downhill bike how you would press on a hardtail, it's not going to work. And vice versa. The way you press on a downhill bike isn't going to work on a hardtail. So they all require different timing, so it takes some experience and takes some practice to figure that out.
That's a really good analogy. I can really relate with that. That
right. Like if you're on a trampoline, you go to jump on like you would on the ground. You just press a trampoline. You don't go anywhere. You got to go slow and get to the bottom, and then you go nice and high.
Yeah. Max, you were saying that you thought it was really important to have like a dirt jumper or a hardtail. What is it? What's the reason that you feel that way?
I think that one of the other thing that I would say that I see people not do on the trail is making the most of pumping rollers and corners and things like that on the trail. And so I think having a dirt jump bike, going to your local BMX track, going, doing gate practice nights, and super fun. Also, just how many pump tracks are coming up now. You're not going to have much fun on your mountain bike, but a dirt jumper, you can get out there. You can, not only is it great fitness, but it's also just going to help you really teach and learn how to get the most out of pumping a roller or a berm or whatever it might be. And then a lot of people, you're talking about learning to manual, for example. And so when you try to learn a manual on a mountain bike with rear suspension, there's a lot more going on. The geometry of the bike is changing as you're trying to do this movement. So put you on a hardtail and it eliminates a lot of those variables. And it's a good sort of way to build some basic skills like that. And then once you feel comfortable on that, it's less of a jump to do it on your trail bike. Whereas trying to do it straight on your trail bike is going to be more difficult, I think.
Yeah, it's more of a direct connection
with
exactly your body and the ground, and there's less like movement in between. Yeah, it's easier to learn.
I think it's just a good skill builder. And the cool thing is they're cheap, relatively speaking, and they last forever, which is nice. It's not like you're breaking parts left, right, and center. And I just think that most people would benefit from having one. Yeah, exactly. Like shocks. Yeah. Broke mine the other day. But yeah, so I think it's a great tool to have. And whether it's a dirt jumper or even a BMX, that's something that's great too. But it just helps you build those basic fundamentals that you see a lot of BMX and dirt jump guys already have. And I think it helps to do that.
Yeah, I can personally attest to I never realized how much speed I could make from pumping. And this is after, at that point, probably like 15 years of mountain biking or, 20 years of riding bike in my life. And then finally going to a local pump track and just realizing that like I didn't have to pedal the whole way around. And I remember the first time I ever dropped in, it was like pedaling through this and pedaling over that and pedaling over that. And I'm like, man, this isn't fun at all. And then somewhere, I don't know if somebody said something to me or it just clicked. And next thing you know, I'm like pumping the whole way around this whole thing. And by the time I'm getting at the end of it, I'm like hitting the brakes because I'm like, holy shit, I'm really freaking cooking right now.
Yeah.
And that has worked into my trail riding in so many ways that it's like I can't even explain it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think another thing with the pumping, that if you're trying to pedal when you could be pumping, you're changing, your pedals are moving around, your body's weight is kind of distributed differently. You're more likely to clip your pedals, certainly with how low bottom brackets are getting, the type of trails we're riding. And so if you can eliminate a pedal stroke and just have your body and feet in the right position and pump something, it's going to benefit you a lot more and just make you more comfortable going to that next feature or object or whatever it might be.
Let's hearken to Aaron Wynn's win with no chain.
Yeah.
Zero pedaling.
Yeah.
Purely pumping.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it comes in handy even in like rock gardens and all kinds of stuff where it's just, I think the biggest thing, like what you said, is that, not hitting anything with your pedals when you're in some kind of like janky Rudy sections and you're coming in fast, but you need to keep that speed, and a quarter crank isn't going to do anything. But if you can pump your weight right, then you can just jam right through that. And I think that practice at the bike park, as well as you then also get to like understand how to control the bike under your body as it's reacting to you pumping.
Yeah. And it's not just pumping too. We do it more in private lessons, and Lance and I have talked about it in how-to videos in technical climbing and stuff. So much of it is just allowing your body to keep that momentum going. Like when you're doing a technical climb, and if you just sit kind of dead ass in the seat and you're not doing any kind of hip hinges and dynamic movements, then every time your bike hits a rock, everything slows down, right? And our body's the biggest amount of mass that we have. If you get 220 pounds moving and a 30-pound bike stops, as long as you keep your body going. That's why if you ever watch any of these tech climbing videos that we all do, like we're constantly doing hip hinges and scooting the bike forward and then catching back up, but we're letting our body continue to keep moving. And then our bike might slow down for a second, but then we're accelerating it forward. Because if you could just keep that mass going, your bike can slow down and speed up. It won't be a problem. You just don't want to let your body stop moving. So it's kind of like the opposite of pumping. Like, when you're going uphill, you're not pumping into the ground, but you are scooting your bike forward constantly and letting it keep moving over those obstacles.
Yeah. Once again, great way to explain it. I think that proves my point that I said earlier about how I don't explain things very well. I'm just like, just let it move around underneath you. You'll be fine.
Not bad. It's okay. It's not bad.
Yeah. It's just it's always interesting to me hearing people that have the ability to teach, because it's a certain perspective, that you have to have in order to do that. And it isn't necessarily like, hey, that guy's a good rider. That doesn't mean that he could teach you how to ride a bike,
100%.
Very true.
Yeah, absolutely. True. And I feel like with mountain bike trials, when we're mountain biking, like if you have momentum, everything's good. Like half the technical climbs, if it was on a flat section or a downhill, it'd be super easy. The only reason it's hard on a climb is because you don't have momentum. So much stuff momentum makes so much things easier when you're riding. And when you do mountain bike trials, you don't have momentum. You're doing everything from a standstill. So not that mountain bike trial is necessarily going to make you a good mountain biker, because I have plenty of trials rider friends that are terrible mountain bikers. But then I also have some, like you had Kenny Belay on. He's a world-class trials rider and he's an amazing mountain biker. They're not mutually mutually combined or whatever, but
you can't make any assumptions,
right? But it does
one
make
or the other.
But just being a trials rider makes you aware of like what you're doing with your body, because you don't have momentum ever. You got to create it. So not everything translates to mountain biking, but definitely makes you consider that quite a bit when you're analyzing what's going on when you're riding.
Yeah. It's a lot of the skills like kind of layer on top of each other. I mean, earlier we were talking about pushing into a jump, and then we were talking about pumping. And I think that's a really similar body movement or like bike movement that you're doing there, because I've told people to pump before, and I've seen them just like bounce, like literally like straight up and down. And it's like, you're not actually doing what I'm talking about, and it's hard to like, I think once people get it and they can feel that kind of gravity, kind of push, like it's that same feeling, then you can relate that to a jump, or you can relate. Am I on the right track there? I see somebody nodding. Somebody's like, I don't know what this dude's talking about.
No, I think that's one of the first things we talk about with body position. Once we get you dialed front to back, side to side, then we talk about up and down. There's a lot of times when we ride our mountain bikes that we want our bikes to be heavy, and there's times that we want it to be light, and that's from pumping. If you're pumping, you're making the bike heavy, and if you want it to be light, say I'm coming into a rock garden, I'm going to pump and then try to be light over it, So we're making our bikes light and heavy, and that's a perfect example. Like when you're going down the backside of a roller, we pump because it magnifies that downforce or that downslope. So it'll give us forward momentum. When we're going up a jump, we pump into it because it's going to magnify that. It's going to give us height. So that pumping is always going to like increase what the ground is doing. Conversely, if we want to scrub a jump, then we're going to try to be light. So, but we can manage what the ground's doing, whether we press into the ground or if we like lift, or, after we press into the ground. There's a lot of things we could do.
Yeah.
But it is, like you said, it's all managing the terrain.
Yeah. It's interesting. So when people come to training or whatever type of instruction, do you recommend that they come with flats, or if they are used to clips, they use clips? Do you have any rules there?
No rules.
We don't really have any rules. I think if, in an ideal world, is it good to learn on flats? For sure. But if it's going to compromise your whole weekend and you're not going to enjoy it, or you're going to struggle, then, there's things that we could look for and work around that with clipless pedals. I ride clipped in all the time. But with 20 years of mountain bike trials under my belt, like I can ride flats if I want to. I just like riding clipped in. These two pretty much always ride on flats.
Yeah.
Once in a while, Lance will clip in, but it's pretty rare. There's benefits.
I can. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
You can go back and forth.
Yeah.
I think it's good to go what the rider's comfortable with too. If some of this person's ridden clipless all their life, then they may not be comfortable. But if they are comfortable, then keep them on that, and that's what they're going to be riding long term. So you can work with that.
Yeah, I for a long time, I just say, well, first of all, when I first started mountain biking, it was like toe clips was what everybody did, right? And then clipless came along, and so like most of my mountain biking experience was always being clipped in, but my bike experience before that was all like BMX as a kid growing up in high school, and making ruckus all over town and whatnot. So like I had to experience on both of them, but whenever I got back into mountain biking in my adult years, I just went straight into clips, and I rode like that for a long time. I talked a lot of people out of using flats because I was like, it's so efficient, all the things that all the clips people say, right?
Yeah.
And somewhere along the line, I started watching all these other like YouTubers and stuff that were riding flats, and they were saying, shoes are better, the pedals are better, and whatever. And I gave it a shot, and I realized like there was a lot of bad habits that I made from clips. So it really completely changed my mind.
Yeah, I feel like I ride clipped in all the time, but I like to say, like, for me, I think it's good to work on your fundamentals on flats, because then when you do clip in, you could like level up. So it makes you Superman or Superwoman. But if you just always ride clips, then you're just man or woman. But if you're clipped in, if you ride flats and you clip in, then you're Superman or Superwoman. So you don't have that ability to level up. There's nothing wrong with either one, but I feel like you can definitely get extra benefits it's definitely way more efficient to ride clipped in for sure.
Yeah.
Like anybody who says climbing doesn't make a difference, whatever. I could do the same ride on
Climbing
flats.
is 100%
Yeah.
better, no doubt.
Yeah. People, if I do the same ride on flats and then the next day go back on clips, it's easier. Even not even tech stuff, just pedaling up a hill. It's definitely.
And the shoes
definitely
come
easier.
into play, stiffer and whatnot.
Yeah.
But you lose feel.
Yeah.
But I also think though, with trails becoming more and more technical, one thing you see people is they struggle at slow speeds, to control over the tech terrain. And so I think by going to a flat pedal, it might give the rider a little bit more confidence. If they feel like they're going to fall over, they can just take their foot off and they can put it down. And there's a little bit lower consequence to trying these more technical features where if you're clipped in and you're not, it's not second nature just to pop your foot off out of the clip, then, it's going to give you that confidence to try these, knowing you can put a foot down very easily or take both feet off the bike.
Even for myself, 100%. When I'm clipped in, I don't want to play around as much. I'm nervous about balance lines or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you lose it a split second for sure. With being clipped in.
Yeah,
no doubt.
I think it's a good way to, if you want to improve your slow speed technical riding, going flaps is a good way to help build the confidence to try stuff you might not otherwise do so.
I felt like my clip, and I still use clipless pedals on my gravel bike and stuff. I've been actually considering throwing them back on my mountain bike again just recently to see kind of how I feel about it now after a couple of years on flats. But I felt like the clipless pedals really they weren't conducive to like having your feet in the right position on your pedals to corner better. Do you guys agree with that? Like it doesn't like put you in that like that spot because like where your foot's kind of on the like the ball of your foot, you're not dropping your heel or you know what I mean?
I feel like clipless made the cornering felt better. I think in the few
Really?
times I use clipless stuff, I feel like you can. I don't know. You feel like you
Because
can turn the bike more.
and you can press harder.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I can't explain it, but I feel like it felt better in the corners being clipless. I thought.
Interesting.
What do you think?
Well, as a trials rider, I could tell you that for the longest time, I thought I really sucked at cornering because we don't have to corner when we ride trials. And also growing up on the East Coast, we never had berm turns until mountain bike parks recently. So I was always a decent flat turn guy and a decent rocky turn guy, but I definitely did not do good at berms.
Mm-hmm.
When I went through my little enduro racing stage, probably 8 or 10 years ago, I did the Winter Park EWS, and on like the technical stages, I did, relative for whatever, I did pretty decent. And then there was one bermy stage, and I did really terrible. And I think it's because if you give up like a tenth of a second on 100 berms, that's several seconds,
Mm-hmm.
So if you're riding with your buddies, it wouldn't be like, wow, Jeff sucks at berm turns, but like on a run with 100 berms, it adds up. I feel like now that I've been doing more coaching, then since I tell people what to do all the time, then you tell yourself to do it all the time. And I feel like I turn better on berm turns with flat pedals than clip pedals.
You have more feel.
Because when you one of the things you want to do on those berm turns is point your hips. And if you could point your hips and really torque the pedals with your feet, so not like adjust your feet on the pedals, but just put torque into those pins with a good grippy pair of shoes, it just feels like the bike just steers through those turns so much faster. Whereas on a SPD, it just kind of just pivots. There's no resistance. But if I'm standing on a sticky pair of pedals, I could really torque my feet and really drive the bike through those turns. At least I feel like it.
Yeah, I felt like I was able to do that with the clipless.
Better.
I mean, I guess it depends on the pedals you're using too. Some have more float than others, maybe.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But I guess just feeling connected to it, I felt like you could almost get more movement out of the bike from it. I don't know. But
I question though, Max, whether or not that comes from already understanding the technique from experience with flats. You know what I mean? And then that's why, like, maybe, but like where somebody they spend most of their time on clips all along, like you don't have that like foundation.
Yeah, that could be true.
Flats have the better feel. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You really feel what your feet are doing and the pressure you're applying. Clipless has the stiffer shoes and, that you're kind of floating. So the interface it's more of a variable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and for me, like I had that like BMX background, so maybe that's that feel is definitely a big thing, that to kind of understanding what's going on with your bike. So I feel like riding with clips, at least when you're really trying to learn something, is I don't know. Maybe it's just my own personal opinion. I feel like it dampens that,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Robert, what do you say we start answering some of the questions people are asking and try to get people to, as I'm hijacking your own live stream. And
you think
we could talk about coaching all day, but I feel like that's boring. I want to talk about Lance's career prior to Trail Bus Academy.
Yeah, let's talk about it. What'd you do, Lance?
Not an adult actor. It's actually more exciting. So Lance and I have been riding mountain bike trials for 25 years. He was a resident at Cirque du Soleil in Florida. So have you ever been to Disney in Orlando?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, so there was like a installation show or whatever.
Resident show.
Mm-hmm. And he was a cast member there for over 15 years. So this guy has probably more views than any YouTuber ever combined, just live views as a cast member in a Cirque du Soleil show. And nobody even knows who he is.
Old school. That's old school.
Old school before YouTube, when people actually came and watched
grassroots. Yeah.
So you were riding bike in that show?
Yeah, it was kind of mountain bike trials, the same, what we've been doing for years, just hopping around, going through the audience, jumping over people. It was sort of like a textbook trial show, but in a very theatrical environment. So it was pretty phenomenal. Yeah.
So you were like dressed up like Pluto, but
not exactly. I mean, there was costume and other assorted regalia, but no, it was a spectacle for sure.
How'd you get into that?
Originally, we had a good friend that was involved. Doug White was involved with doing trials competitions, and we knew him for years. And he had been originally, he kind of laid the foundations and was at that show for about 5 years, and then he was gonna kind of retire, and said, "Hey guys, anybody else interested?" And I just got out there and ended up signing on with it.
Yeah. Actually, that story is kind of interesting. So this was literally over 25 years ago. There was a show called Ordinary Extraordinary. It was a pilot episode for, just a variety TV show with John Ritter, Jack Tripper from Three's Company.
Yeah.
So he was the host.
We're dating ourselves right now, Jeff.
Yeah.
Nobody else.
Yeah. So Jack Tripper was the host.
Even Max doesn't know what that show is.
No, I have no idea.
He was the host. This woman who was Miss America was the co-host, and I was riding for Schwinn at the time, and they invited Jay Miron, who is a BMX freestyle legend, to come and do the world's first ever double backflip. So that was he was the star of the show, doing the world's first ever double backflip. And Sean Peters, who is a flatlander for BMX, and myself, we did like a quick little like intro before they introduced Jay, the star of the show. Like I hopped off some scaffolding and Sean did some flatland stuff, and then Jay stole the show and did the world's first ever double backflip, and the rest was history, whatever. So I guess they were starting to cast that show then. So I had just been in Orlando, and then like a couple weeks later, some of Jay's friends called me and said like, "Hey, they're casting the show," and they called in all the local flatland guys. But the second they saw that they wanted you to hop upstairs and off elevator floors and stuff, we knew it was a trials rider, and we just met you like 2 weeks ago. So they gave him my name. But I was like just gotten on Schwinn, maybe like 2 years riding pro, traveling around doing a lot of demos, and I didn't want to move to Florida at the time. So then I recommended Doug White, who lived down there, to do the show, and then he did it for 5 years. And then when he gave it up, Lance auditioned against a few of our friends, and he beat everybody and got the show. But yeah, that was kind of the origin. It was all because Jay Miron did the first ever world's ever backflip.
There you go.
Yeah.
So Lance, what was your favorite part of doing that?
It was just an amazing experience. top-notch facilities. Really, like it wasn't like a bicycle sport level thing. Like it was just a whole level higher than that, where basically anything we needed or wanted, they just provided for us. So we had a whole practice area, and you're just riding every day. So it was premier level athletics, and that was honestly my dream. Like I always wanted to be a professional athlete, so that's what it was. Just go, go every day, warm up, do your stuff, and
Ride for a packed house.
come. Yeah,
How many thousands of people each day?
Yeah, it was like 1,500 people in the audience per show.
Yeah.
So
would they give you like direction, like, hey, we think it would be cool if you jumped off of this, thing or into this thing, or we want to set this on fire, and then you flip it into there, or did you kind of come up with your own stuff?
Yeah, well, the basic framework was there, and then it evolved over time, every month or throughout the years, and it was it was always a work in progress. I call it like performance art. So it was kind of like, it was evolving over time, and it was a great deal. Yeah.
But
when you look back,
license, right? Like,
well, no, once like everybody agreed what was going to happen, then it was basically choreographed.
Yeah.
With like at least a dozen other people, and light effects and music and other special effects. So you're not just freestyling every day. Like it was very strict. So that was kind of the hard part, where normally when we would do a trial show, you kind of mess around and you take your own time, but this was like literally on the beat of the music. So it wasn't just riding, it was performance riding. So it kind of was a little bit more intense than what we're used to.
Yeah.
When you look back on your career of doing that, what is the thing, like the moment that like comes to mind?
Meeting Eli Manning.
yeah. There was a lot of celebrities and stuff that went through there.
I like how Jeff answered for you. This is what was most important.
Well, personally, for me, it's that Lance met Eli Manning.
Yeah, he's a big guy.
Yeah,
he's like way bigger than you think. No, it was just I don't know. I mean, some of the close calls, truthfully. I mean, it was like, you're dealing with the bicycle and just live every day, and you think you know what's going to happen, but sometimes the audience like reaches out and tries to grab you or something, or somebody gets up and walks across, or it was just a dynamic environment. It's so much spontaneity that it was really exciting, like pretty much every day.
Yeah, I can imagine. How about you, Jeff? Was it like being on Regis and Kathy Lee? Was that the moment for you when you look back on your career?
That was the moment for my mom. 100%. Yeah, the tides turned for my parents the day that I was on Regis and Kathy Lee, for sure.
Finally, they were like, "Oh, you're not wasting your life."
Yeah, it was like 100%. What are you doing? This is ridiculous. And then their friends were like, "Oh my God, you must be so proud." And then it was like the light bulb went off, and then they've kind of been supportive ever since. But yeah, I mean, I've been super lucky. Those Schwinn days were probably the craziest because it wasn't so much about me. It wasn't so much about me. Like I obviously had to be able to deliver, but Schwinn was a huge story. It was their 100th year anniversary. So as long as you could go and like perform in front of a live audience or give a decent interview or whatever, like we did Regis and Kathy Lee and the Today Show and MTV Beach House every year and like all this crazy stuff. So that was probably like the coolest part for live demos. Plus, like before YouTube and everything, like all those live shows were huge. I used to go and do that stuff and people never saw it. So nowadays, like even somebody who goes to a Danny McCaskill video live show is probably disappointed because they see a Danny McCaskill video on YouTube and you can't repeat something that you do 100 times. This was like before anybody ever saw that. Like the only time you'd ever see that was live in person. So Lance was there doing it for Volvo Cannondale. back in the day, I did it for Schwinn. Like people used to go nuts for those demos. It was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, to see that stuff all laid out one after another without somebody messing up is like crazy impressive, you know.
Max was probably just born then. It was 10.
I probably saw some highlights at some point.
Max is literally like
some archives.
Max is literally like the typical thing where like somebody like him will be like, oh yeah, I grew up riding, watching you, and then they're like a 35-year-old guy like he is. Like,
yeah,
as you get older, they're not 20-year-old kids anymore. I grew up watching you ride. They're like grown men. Doesn't mean they've been doing this shit a long time.
So, what was it about Max other than his manual capabilities that made you decide like, hey, this guy should be part of the Trail Velocity Academy?
Well, we got along good right from the get-go. He did a bunch of like ski coaching and huge interest in personal training. So like that obviously, is a similar mindset. But I think it's just like a personality thing. Like I feel like we got along just right from the jump. So kind of like a no-brainer.
How about you, Max? What made you say yes to Jeff saying, let's do this?
So like Jeff said, I'd done some ski coaching before, and my other passion aside from riding bikes and other things is going to the gym, and definitely going to the gym with buddies who are new to it or want to kind of get to another level on it. It's cool to go and coach people. So I've always enjoyed teaching people things and just kind of helping people learn. And so when the opportunity came up to coach with Jeff and Lance, I couldn't really say no. I was really excited about it, and it was definitely something that I'm super excited about, and not something I'd necessarily thought about too much before, but really stoked on the opportunity, and it's been awesome so far. And like I said, it's just really cool to see, to share your passion with other people and see them getting fired up when they made something that they didn't think they could, or they got better. And I don't know, it's just fun to be around that environment, I guess.
How about any of you? What's your favorite thing to coach? I know like there's got to be one where you're like, man, I love doing this. So this is really cool. I love seeing people come to this moment. Or
who are you talking to, sorry?
Anybody wants to answer.
This weekend, right? Like literally people that we were out there with at Thunder Mountain were right there, and like they were improved. They were benefiting from.
Yeah, it's like farm to table. We did a clinic at Thunder Mountain 2 weeks ago, and last weekend, a week later, they bumped into some of them at Mountain Creek and saw them like obviously riding at a higher level. So it's pretty rewarding.
Yeah, I think it's cool to see people like at the start of a day, maybe or a weekend, so you kind of ride past a trail and there's a really tech feature, and they're looking and thinking, man, it'd be really cool to hit that. And by the end of the weekend, they are hitting it, and they never thought they would from the start. And it's kind of cool to see them build the confidence to try those features out. I think that's always fun. I love tech features. Definitely one of my favorite things to do. So when you see someone make it for the first time and they're like thinking about it and checking it out, and you're talking through it, and then they actually hit it and see how stoked they are on it, I think that's really cool.
Mm-hmm. So are you talking about like a big rock roll, kind of like a rock garden kind of situation?
It depends where you're riding, I guess. But yeah, on a bike park, rock roll's cool, or maybe a big drop. Maybe at the start of the day they weren't. Drops just freak them out, or jumps a good example, because a lot of people are intimidated by jumps, and so if you can get them through a cool blue jump line by the end of the day, and at the start of it they were just hitting a small table, I think that's pretty rewarding. And to see them just wanting to go and get another lap on it because they're having so much fun, I think that's really cool.
I don't think there's a lot of progressive like drops in anywhere for people to really like practice on. Like I'll see some bike parks that are just like, there's a 2 foot, a 3 foot, a 5 foot, a 6 foot, and they're right next to each other. And I think about of all the places that I've ridden that there's nothing like that, and they're like, those are very few and far between.
Yeah, I agree. I think particularly in certain places, like in California, I feel like at least there's not as many bike parks in terms of just local small ones, but then you go to Utah or you go to Colorado, and they just seem to put a lot more money into those parks, and it's a really cool place to learn. Or, you live near Highland, they have the indoor area, they have the bike park itself. And so there's just, you definitely, depending on where you live, you get more exposure to those opportunities, which is a shame in some senses. It'd be cool to see other places jump
I
on
think
board
it's
that.
picking up though. I think it's catching on with the skills areas and like
Definitely.
building practice zones.
Mhm.
I think it's starting to get a little bit more popular.
Yeah, for sure.
I definitely see a change in the past few years for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in general, I mean, you definitely, I mean, just in trails themselves, where, years ago there was, not much at all. And now you can open up trail forks and just kind of pan around the country and you're like, wow, there's trails everywhere.
I think it's tough for you in California and us in New Jersey, where I am in New Jersey. Like, they're very litigious states. So it's kind of, we probably will be the last ones to see skills parks, but like Tennessee, Florida, Wisconsin, Ohio, like places you wouldn't expect. I was in Chelsea, Michigan over the summer. So many of those places, the park managers are really starting to see that like mountain bike is a lifestyle sport. If these parks want the federal funding or state funding, then they need to create and provide, trails and things that people want to use. So it just comes down to money. Like they want to get the funding, and the only way they're going to get the funding to make these riders happy nowadays is start putting those things in. There are less litigious places in New Jersey and California, so they're a little bit more flexible with what they can build. But you see them popping up at a lot of places all around the country.
Yeah, I think people are starting to realize that the money's there too. I mean, I've seen a lot of different states that they're actually like private parks that are like building trails and doing, whatever, instead of it just being something that had to be funded by the state.
Yeah.
What do you think is driving that change?
I feel like mountain biking is it really is a lifestyle sport now. When you and I got into it, or Lance, it was like racing downhill, or it was cross country racing, downhill racing, trials, like three things. Now everybody wants to like go put on their flat soled shoes and their baggy pants and their flannel shirt and stop and have a micro brew and they're done. And it's not so much about just like racing or like that gym mentality. It's, going out, learning a skill, spending time with the friends. I feel like that's probably the biggest thing pushing it. Plus the bikes are so good. A skills park would have been a sketchy proposition 10 years ago. Now the bikes are so good. You can have,
and the bikes would have just broken anyway.
Yeah, you can have lesser skilled riders go, and it's not so sketchy anymore.
Yeah,
really getting it figured out.
Yeah. Even downhill parks, like think of a downhill park 15 years ago, would have been like Broken Collarbone City, and now you can go and rent a bike and try it for the first time and make it down the hill safely because the bike's so good.
Yeah.
And the trails too. They're actually engineering the trails to be rideable.
Yeah.
Like reasonably.
Yeah.
Not just like go through the woods and see what happens.
Yeah.
Well, Max, you could probably speak to this. I had one of my friends say that his experience at Whistler is like everything's built there so well that it's like almost impossible not to be able to like get better.
Yeah, 100%. Like just riding. The cool thing about Whistler is they have such an insane kind of small trail crew there that all love to ride themselves, and they want to not only build stuff that they want to ride, but they know what works and what doesn't. And it's one of those kind of really going there first and getting that experience, and then going to other bike parks. You kind of realize how lucky you are there, where you ride on the trail, and for the most part, everything is trail speed. The jumps get a little bit bigger as you go faster, and slow as you go smaller, or smaller as you go slower. Sorry. Whereas and so to get that experience, and it's just the huge variety of trails as well, and just be able to lap after lap after lap versus having to pedal up and get one lap in per day. You might get 15 laps at the bike park, and you just get the repetition. And I think kind of what we were talking about earlier about people not really sessioning things. People have a tendency to go out on a trail ride and they just want to go up and come down. And I think the bike park just allows you to not only session stuff, but just hit stuff so much more often that you really get to work on those different features or different skills you're trying to focus on.
Do you feel like Whistler being built the way that it is like gives people more confidence than they should have, because it's like so perfect, and then they go somewhere else and then they're like thinking, oh, I did this 35-foot table, and then they go home and they're like, in their backyard trails.
Kind of a
Definitely.
little bit of a comment to that effect.
Yeah, and I think it definitely depends on where you're riding. But when you're used to riding stuff that's built really well, and you go other places where it's not quite built the same, and you're expecting it to be built one way, then I think that can lead to some overconfidence for sure. Yeah, so I think to an extent that can definitely do that. Just the I could see that, and I know that when I left Whistler and kind of started going other places and whatnot, you have to be a little bit more aware of certain things. I think just at different speeds for certain jumps, where some
I
jumps
feel
are
like
maybe
when
a
you
bit
got here, you
smaller.
were overconfident.
Overconfident.
Yeah. And then you had to like work into it. You had to really apply yourself a little more. You were used to the luxury of premier building.
Yeah, well,
then you got into the nitty-gritty.
Then he was introduced to East Coast hardcore.
Yeah.
No, but actually, I've been really stoked on the parks out here. I thought we went to Thunder Mountain, and I was it completely exceeded my expectations. It's been really cool, and then even Mountain Creek as well. Had an awesome time there, and I definitely will be coming back next year to do an East Coast tour for sure, and go check out Highlands as well and all those spots. So I think the cool thing about the East Coast and the Midwest and these places, it's cool to see smaller mountains where maybe the skiing is either non-existent or just very basic skiing, realizing that they can have all the terrain they need for an awesome mountain bike park. They don't need, as much vertical as a really, as the Rockies or a place like that. You don't need these huge mountain ranges to have a great bike park. You just need some elevation. And I think you're starting to see a lot more of that, and these smaller resorts making amazing bike parks and really putting in a lot of money into it, which is super cool.
I think you 100% nailed it there. I mean, I went to that Spider Mountain in Texas, and I think it has 350 feet of elevation loss, and I had a great time riding there.
I've never been. It was pretty sweet.
Yeah, it blew me away. Like, put it this way. Like, I showed up there leaving Northern California, where we do like downhill runs that are 15 miles long. You know what I mean? So it's like, oh yeah, like I rode from the top of Armstrong down to the bottom of Corral. That was 9 miles yesterday. And now I'm in Texas, and they're going to have a 350 feet elevation loss. Like, There is almost impossible to show up and not be like, this is going to be bullshit. Yeah. Like I totally did not think that it was going to be as fun as it was. I had a blast all day long. Like, so if they can do that in 350 feet, it really makes you realize what you can do. And like what you said, Max, like there's a lot of ski resorts where I grew up in Pennsylvania that they're not huge. Their longest run is not even a quarter of the size of something we have in Tahoe. But man, they could build some sick mountain bike stuff up there,
And the seasons are longer too. Like the summer, the period where the snow's gone is longer. So you have a longer season to be able to ride. You have all the spring, summer, and fall to be able to ride these parks, and you're all in the trees. This awesome dirt, and I think Thunder Mountain's a great example where it's a pretty small resort, and yet they have that Fort Hill run, which is a huge set of jumps and drops, and it's so cool to see these smaller resorts making kind of like world-class trails, honestly, and hopefully that will continue to spread, and it's also just a cool way for a business to operate in the summer and continue to make money and allow more people to ride. And I think bike park's just a great way to build your skills with how many laps you can get in and how many repetitions.
100%. It's like a no-brainer. Like I see a future where every ski resort has mountain bike runs, because it's like you have the infrastructure built already, and now instead of having, depending on what part of the country you're in, it could be 9 months of the year that you're not operating, and you have this, like, before they were having to make their whole year's salary or income in like 3 months or 4 months, and now you can open that up to the whole year. It just is like, I mean, I don't understand why they're not all like cutting dirt right now,
Yeah, 100%.
Did you know that Gravity Logic built a lot of the Thunder Trails?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, that's why they seem familiar.
Yeah.
Thunder Mountain is in Western Massachusetts, and a lot of their trails were built by Gravity Logic, which builds at Whistler.
Oh, right on.
So yeah, they're like cool. super dialed.
Max, did you get a chance to do any like local trail rides back there? Have you ridden in the East Coast much?
No, this is actually my first time. I'd been to New York City twice, I think, for a few days just to visit some family, but I'd never ridden out here. So this is kind of the first time I've really got to check it out, which is why it's been super cool.
Hardcore local. This
So
guy,
I got just local
trail.
trail experience the other day. That was super fun.
Really got into the nitty gritty
trail ride I've done so far, but it's cool. It's completely different because it's so rocky. But also, I think there's just tons of potential. You have all these giant rock slabs and things you can work into the trail. And I mean, obviously, loving tech riding, it's right up my alley. I thought it was a really good time.
I was recently home. I'm from Pennsylvania. I was recently home, and it was really different. Like I mean, I grew up riding back there, but I kind of forgot. It's been 20 years since I've been back there and riding, let's say, and the way that the rocks react with your tires and the grip there compared to like what we experience out here in California is so different. So it was really it was a little humbling for me to get back on the tech there and kind of have to maneuver it,
especially wet routes and things like that. And you actually have real dirt loam and stuff like that, which is really cool. So
the rocks sweat here.
Yeah.
Phenomenon. The humidity actually, the moisture from the ground comes up through the rocks.
It's crazy.
Bizarre.
Where are you from in PA again? I know we talked about this.
York. So South Central, kind of like. So I was riding up in the Caledonia area, kind of like close to Harrisburg, Mechanicsburg, kind of that area, like west of there, I guess.
Lance and I spent lots of time in Hershey, Pennsylvania.
Oh, right on.
Because all the motorcycle trials was really popular back then, and they would always host bike trial events. So we spend tons of time around there.
Yeah, I found it really difficult for me to like for my brain to see where the trail was going, because out here it's really we don't have a lot of leaves and stuff like that on the trail. So, and then it's also, not super green. So between it being so green and the leaf cover on the ground, I was really having a hard time of knowing where I was at. And then on top of it, like, you don't actually know what's under the leaves. So like having to be like ride loose enough to be able to navigate what's going on under your tires that you can't see was really something that I like a skill set I've forgotten.
Yeah,
you gotta feel
definitely experience that firsthand this trip. All the leaves are falling, and on the tech trails and things, you're just like, well, not quite sure what's underneath here. And then also when you're in the woods, you don't really know where the trail goes. If it's not a very popular trail, you kind of say, well, it could go anywhere. This looks like it might be the way. Hopefully I'm going in the right direction, But it's cool. It's just another element that makes it a bit more.
Not a tremendous difference between on the trail and off the trail.
Well, yeah, that's true too. Yeah.
In reality, yeah.
And the thing that you were saying about the rocks sweating is like, I can't tell you how many times my tire just like slid or spun sideways because of the way the rock was shaped. And like out here, even it seems like even when our rocks are wet, they're grippy. Like back there, it seemed like it didn't matter what, like I was sliding on all of them,
Yeah.
More mossy and
our rocks doesn't matter if yours don't matter if it's wet, they're still sticky. Ours don't matter if they're dry, they're still slippery.
You better be on your toes.
Yeah, it was really interesting because like, go ahead.
I was gonna say every year when I go to Sedona or something like that for the first time after a while, the biggest hurdle is just like retraining your brain how quickly you could stop. Like you'll look at a roll in or something and you're like, there's no way I'm stopping. Because you think about if it was on the East Coast, there's literally no way you would stop. It just wouldn't happen. And then you start riding in Sedona for a day or two and you start seeing like how much traction you have, the ridiculous things you can climb, and then you get used to it. But it's a huge change at first because we don't have that traction here.
Yeah. I was definitely reintroduced to East Coast riding, and it was it was painful. We'll just say it like that. What are you looking forward to the most with the upcoming year and tread loss?
So we'll let them answer as well. But I guess for me, it's just getting to work with them and trying to get some more consistency in the events. I started coaching probably 2 years ago, but it was kind of like a half-hearted effort. Then this year I saw how receptive people were to it, but it was still trying to like squeeze it in between other events I had planned and all the other crap that I have going on. And next year I want to be a lot more intentional, like get them on the calendar and plan around them versus trying to squeeze them in around my other schedule, like make that the priority. Because, as a sponsorship is still a pretty important component of what I do, but that's super valuable for your partners to get out and work with spend the weekend working with 20, 40 riders that really trust you. That impression could be just as valuable as going to a festival and just riding with 60 people for an hour, So even though the numbers aren't quite as high, it's still super important. It's probably it's definitely the most rewarding thing I do nowadays is like we went to Thunder Mountain 2 weeks ago and we had camping. We rode with people for 2 days. Like by the end of the weekend, it's like you're all buddies. It's awesome. Like it's a win-win for everybody. They go home feeling like they've improved, can ride safer and more confidently. We put on a fun event. We all made some new friends. It's pretty cool.
How about you, Lance?
I would say just working with me, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was going to say. Yeah. Well, I guess also I'd add to that. I'm looking forward to kind of going to some different places and riding new terrain that I haven't, and meeting the local riders as well, and just meeting new people. And yeah, I think that'll be super fun. Definitely, going to different places will be cool. Like I said, I've mainly been down the West Coast for the most part, and this is my first East Coast trip, and it was awesome. And it'll be cool to, like I said, even go to Texas, a place like that. It'd be fun to go and see what that's all about and see what the local scene's like too, I think that's always fun.
Indeed.
Nice. How about you?
Yeah, it's really cool to see through we work with fathers and their kids or moms and kids, and it's cool to get through the generations and influencing people. Like when we all started riding, we were just, I don't know, for me, I think for you, it's just like you were just messing around and trying to figure things out, or you'd see the VHS tape of somebody and watch it 100 times and be like, whoa, maybe I could do that. But really getting some good core instruction for younger riders and with their parents too, that's really rewarding.
Basically trying to give the parents the tools they need to hold off their kids a little bit longer because they're breathing down their necks. So if you're a parent, you're watching this and your kid's getting too good, call 1-800-TRAIL-BOSS.
Now you're gonna have to get the number.
We might be able to buy you 6 months or a year, but your kids are getting too good too fast.
That's funny. You have a couple of younger kids, Jeff. You working with them?
I don't have younger kids. I have adult kids.
My adult
son,
kids.
Jack's 21. Yeah, Jack's 21. He is annoyingly naturally talented. He'll hop on a bike every now and then, and you had to have seen me. If anybody's ever watched me, I'd make punch videos all the time. He could hop on his bike and go over a 2-foot log, no problem. No practice.
It's not even interesting for him. It's too easy.
No problem. So he's a natural. My daughter's 19 now, and she just finished a career, whatever you want to call it, of competition cheer. So she's looking for the next thing, and I keep telling her it should be mountain biking, but she says it's too dangerous. So I don't know if you've ever watched the Netflix cheer documentary, that was her. I don't know how you think bike riding's dangerous.
Yeah, the way they're getting
my youngest is 12. My youngest is 12, and he likes going for bike rides, but we just go for chill bike rides.
Yeah.
My kids don't want to learn from everybody else. What's that?
How about you, Lance? You have kids?
No, just pets. Just pets and
There
buddies.
you go. How about you, Max?
No kids.
There you go. So you guys got open schedules then, huh?
Yep.
So is the idea with the events that all three of you will be at each one of those things every month, or are you thinking that like there's like something that's, Lance is doing this one in January by himself and Max is doing this one in February by himself, or how's it going to play out?
That would be the ideal situation. Lance likes to play hard to get. So, when we can get him, we get him. But it isn't always easy.
I'm a prima donna.
He is a little bit of a prima donna. But yeah, like Thunder Mountain we had enough riders that it made sense to have 3, and that would obviously be the goal at all these events. And then private coaching aside, on the side.
So the private coaching definitely happen whenever. So basically, how do people go about finding out about what you guys are doing?
Right over Lance's head, trailboss.bike.
Mm-hmm.
Trailboss.bike has all the information there. Could email. There's an Instagram page. On the website too is everybody's name, so they can follow Max, Lance, myself on social. Trail Boss YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm.
Try to throw these guys in whenever I can, because they're my favorite people to ride with, because not many people that want to waste hours. Just
so true.
Max and I went to Max and I were in Moab 2 weeks ago, and if you look at the Trappe heat map, we probably spent the most amount of time in like a 50-yard area of this pile of rocks. Like we rode everything, but that's like where we spend all our time. Same thing with Lance.
Sometimes those rocks look good.
Sometimes
I missed it. I definitely missed it. Yeah.
Sometimes Lance and I won't even get out of the parking lot. We'll ride 3 hours.
We'll go to the parking lot.
Yeah, exactly. So
that's good stuff. So how does the process go? Like, hey, I want to get a personal session. What do you do? Just send an email and be like, what date works, or?
Yep, trailboss.bike.
That's it.
Yep.
Right on, man. Well, dude, it's been super fun chatting.
Yeah.
Anything you feel like we haven't talked about? I mean, earlier you were like, we're talking about Lance's career. I'm going to make sure I got you happy.
Let's talk about living in Whistler.
I mean, living in Whistler is, for me, Summer Whistler is my favorite place. I haven't been to New Zealand yet, but it's my favorite place for sure. The days are long, the channel's open until 8. I had a downhill bike for most parts. I didn't get too much time in the trail system, but all my friends who still live up there, they stopped buying a bike pass and they just started exploring the trail network. And now I've got moto trials and doing all that. So it's cool because everyone who's there has got the same mentality as you. They love being outdoors. They want to ride bikes. They want to do all these things. And it's just some of the best riding in the world. And it's all there. And I don't know. Every time I go to, I hadn't been in a long time, and I got to go this year for Crankworks, and that was awesome. Just super good to be back, and I need to make it a yearly thing for sure.
Does it ever get boring living in Whistler?
I don't think so. It's just weird. Like if you've ever done a ski season, you're in this kind of bubble. I remember when I first moved there. I don't think I left Whistler after like 4 or 5 months of just only being Whistler, because I didn't have a car or anything, and then you go to Vancouver and that was your trip outside of the bubble. But when you're in the bubble, it's kind of weird. Everything exists in there, and you just do your thing, and everyone's doing the same as you. And I don't know. I don't think it gets boring. I think sometimes you get that island feel where you do want to go and take a trip, and so for a lot of people, they'll do that during the off season. When the rain comes in November time and the ski resort's not open, people go away for a couple of weeks and get some sun and whatever they want to do. But the rest of the time, it's super cool.
I'll tell you what you do. When you're bored in Whistler, you go to Squamish.
There you go. Yeah.
Right.
I think that's still kind of the bubble, I would say. But
right. We were up there.
Yeah. What's your favorite place you've ever ridden?
Honestly, BC up there, all those crazy North Shore trails. Ryan Leach.
Yeah.
Right. He gave me a tour up there. It was phenomenal. I was like absolutely couldn't believe what was going on in those woods.
Yeah. Have you ever been up there, Robert?
No, I haven't. It's funny when you were talking about Whistler, because when I was younger, I took a little bit of a break from mountain biking, and during that time I was really into skiing. and I lived in Europe and I was skiing in the Alps and stuff like that. And I remember thinking, man, I'm going back to the States. Where am I going to go? And I remember just dreaming about going to Whistler. I think I even had like Whistler's like ski run map up on the wall or something like that in my office or something. And I just always thought about going there. And it's funny now, it's like I still want to go to Whistler, but not for the same reasons.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, you go for winter and you stay for summer, you know, and I think the skiing is obviously insane there. It's really good, but the summer there's just so much more to do. The days are longer. It's it's pretty special for sure. Definitely add it to your list.
How about you, Jeff? You've ridden a lot of places. You asked Lance what his favorite place was. What do you like?
So I've been to Whistler a bunch of times. My exposure to the local trails, like around the trail system around the mountain, was only when I did the EWS, like the first couple of years. And that was ridiculous because they're just public trails and they're like the gnarliest trails I've ever ridden in my entire life. And it's insane to think like that's where you can go out after work on a Tuesday afternoon and ride. Like it was the most insane shit I've ever seen. So I would imagine if I went back there and I had more time there, I'd probably say Whistler. But other than that, I would say Moab or Sedona. Probably Sedona and then Moab. Sedona mainly because it's just a little bit more concentrated. Mm-hmm. Moab is awesome, but Sedona is just more of a cluster of that tech stuff that I really like doing. Mm-hmm. But then there's just random places that pop up all over the place, you know, that are really, really fun. But scenery wise, epicness, all that, I'd say Sedona for sure.
I haven't been to the Alps yet though, Europe. I'd like to go check out that. I think like the scene of the parks look really, really cool out there.
Yeah. I never did any riding in Europe. So I know BKXE put a thing up the other day for this ride that they're doing in Peru. And it just the one screenshot, I was like, wow, that looks sick. You know?
Peru guy. Our friend puts together a trip to Peru every year and it looks insane. You know, it's like several 1,000-foot descents and like riding on roads and fields and through people's yards and just nobody cares, and trail systems and urban downhilling, and it's just like pure mayhem.
Awesome. It's the first time I've actually considered like a mountain bike trip. Normally when you see those things come up and it's like, hey, come to Moab and ride for $3,000. I'm like, you're high, dude. I'm not. You know what I mean? I'm like, I'll go out there and do it on my own or something like that. But when you see something like that and like, then you really start to think about it. I rode in Jamaica over the summer, and that was one of those places where I always wanted to ride. And that was definitely like what you were explaining, Jeff, where it's like, these are like trails that have been there for like hundreds of years that the like people use to like get around. Right.
Yeah.
And there's like corners and turns and everything's so overgrown. Like there is no way you can do that without a guide, you know?
Yeah.
You might be going slow.
Yeah. It was definitely interesting. And our shuttle was a taxi. So.
Oh, for real?
Yeah. It was every time we got down, we took our bikes apart, put it in the back of this, like what looked like what are those? It's like a little cube looking car that they sell.
Like a Soul or something?
Something like that. Looked like sort of like that, you know?
Yeah.
And it was like they popped up the back, man. We stuffed 3 bikes in the back of it and they drive us up some rickety road, you know, and dodging potholes and drop us off and, you know, next to some goats or something like that. And next thing you know, we're jamming down people's backyards and through the jungle. And it was crazy. So it was really fun.
That's awesome. That was recently?
Yeah, that was this summer. So I'll probably get to editing it sometime in the next 6 months. No, I'm just kidding. If you want to swing by my Patreon, you can see the Patreon cut right now. So
is it really up there?
Yeah. Swear to God, I'll send it to you afterwards.
Awesome.
I'll shoot it over there to you. It's definitely I don't know, like the experience in my head was an epic experience, but not for like the riding. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like this was just the craziest tech and the sickest trails. It was like, no, this is just really rad being in this different country out in the middle of nowhere and using this taxi cab to get up the hill and going through and seeing like the neighborhoods and stuff like that in that perspective, that is so different than maybe what you would experience if you were just going to Jamaica to sit at the resort. And to me, that was epic. But so I feel like I'm really concerned on how I do the edit to not like set people up thinking that it's like just going to be this crazy sick adventure. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's true though. Like back in the day when we used to film for all those New World Disorder films and stuff, those were some of the best trips I've ever had in my life. We would go to Copenhagen or Barcelona, Paris, like all these different cities, and we would just ride around on our bike all day. Every back alley, just looking for every single like diamond in the rough that we could find. Covering so much ground that you would never cover on foot, covering places that you would never go as a tourist, just really seeing like behind the scenes of all these great cities. And it was similar to, like you said, in Jamaica, just going to all these places you would normally never go, because you're just covering ground by bike and just spending the whole entire day out there.
Yeah.
Just riding everywhere, every back alley, every main street, every monument, every museum, just trying to find cool stuff to ride.
Yeah. It's definitely an experience. I had a good time. I really, really did have a good time. So the one thing that I can say that has been the biggest plus of having a YouTube channel or this YouTube channel is it really inspired me to travel and ride. And like in times whenever it'd be like in the past, if I went to Hawaii, I would go to Hawaii to like sit on the beach and drink like cocktails, and that would be that. And now it's like, oh, I'm going to Hawaii, or oh, I'm going to, back home for a funeral. It's like I'm bringing my bike and I'm going to ride too. And you just see the world in a different way. That's it's really cool. It's a really cool experience.
Is that weird when you show up to the funeral with mud on your face and stuff? Or you didn't like, it wasn't that close?
Sweaty shorts.
Yeah. It was definitely weird whenever I like freaking tried to impale myself with my handlebar, and I was like standing there like, oh my God, it still hurts.
I didn't think Robert would be so broken up. He's crying. He has a tear in his eye.
Yeah. Little did they know I was bleeding out.
Because you impaled yourself hours earlier with your handlebar.
Yeah, it was all internal bleeding. Well, man, I had a great time chatting with you guys. Really, really did. And it was good to meet you, Max and Lance, as well. Hopefully we can bump into each other, maybe at Sedona this year or something like that. Definitely. Those of you guys that have been listening, thanks. We all appreciate it. Swing by trailboss.bike and check out what he has going on over there. You can also check out the Instagram Trail Boss Academy, as well as, I know, I'm assuming Jeff's is Trail Boss, or is yours Jeff Lenosky?
Mine's just my name. But if you want to find these guys, I repost all the time on Trail Boss Academy Instagram. So that'd be the easiest way to just like go there, see a sick video of Max, click through, or Lance or whatever, rather than trying to remember everybody's names or whatever.
Yeah, definitely. So swing by there and you can check it out. I appreciate everybody that has been hanging out the whole time. Like I said earlier, give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you want to see some more. If you could write me a review over there at the Apple Podcast Review Center, whatever you want to call that spot, it would be great. I really appreciate anybody that takes the time. It's fun always to read those, and when the new ones pop up, it always brings a smile on my face. So you could be the guy like making me happy. So anyways, with all that being said, remember one thing: it only takes a bike to be a biker. So get out and be one.
All right, take it easy.